Well, all right. Welcome to LinkedIn Learning Office Hours. I'm Drew Boyd, and thanks for being with me today. So, what is going on in the mind of your consumer? Do you really know? Does it matter if you know what's going on in that little head of theirs? Well, I think you're going to find out it matters a lot. Today, I want to bring on a special guest, longtime friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Frank Kardes, truly one of the world's leaders in the field of consumer psychology and consumer behavior, understanding what's going on in that consumer's head. So let me bring Frank on here, make sure we don't have any audio issues. Let's see if I can get him to join me here. And there he is, the man, the legend. Hi, Frankie. How are you, buddy? Okay, looks like you're on mute here. It might be something on my end. Let's see if I can free you up here. How's that? Is that better?
How's that?
That's better. Yay, we can hear you. All right. Great. The perils of live streaming. So, Frank, thanks for coming on.
Oh,
we have comments.
Thanks for having me, Drew.
Yeah, we have comments coming in from different people from around the world. It's always nice to see the different people we get here, like Charity from Kenya. I know we have different people from different backgrounds and different geographies. So that's great. And go ahead and, post your comments to Frank, your questions and comments, and I'll be monitoring those, and we'll get those questions over to Frank. I'm going to lead off with a few things right off the bat, Frank. And, you and I have talked about consumer behavior and consumer psychology a lot. But, from a company's point of view, why does it matter to them in terms of knowing what's inside the consumer's head? What's in it for them?
Okay. Well, just about every company says they want to understand their consumer better. I've never heard a company not say that. And the best way to understand a consumer is to understand the psychology of the consumer involved in judgment, inference, and decision making. So almost all of my research focuses on judgment, inference, and decision making. And as you were saying, I try to get inside the head of the consumer. I'm trying to understand the psychological processes involved in persuasion, social influence, how people evaluate products and services, what kind of, we call them implicit theories. What sort of implicit theories come to mind when consumers think about products or the marketing of products? So for me, consumer psychology is all about understanding consumer response to products and services and the marketing of products and services. And of course, marketing includes all of the four P's, right? So all of the four P's are important here.
Well, I think a lot of people would say, "Hey, wait a minute. You know, I'm a consumer. I shop. I'm an expert. I go to Nordstrom and I
Yeah.
shop online on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
What's so hard about this? What are the major areas of
Yeah.
consumer behavior do you think people
Well,
don't understand or overlook?"
well, you're touching on a very famous judgmental bias. A lot of my work focuses on different types of judgmental biases, which often influence consumers without their awareness, right? So they don't even realize they're doing this. But the particular bias you're talking about now is called the false consensus effect. People overestimate how many people are just like them. And the nice thing is it works in both directions. So smokers overestimate how many smokers there are. Non-smokers overestimate how many non-smokers there are. It works in both directions. It works in politics too. Democrats overestimate how many Democrats there are, and Republicans overestimate how many Republicans there are. And these overestimations can lead to big surprises in elections and, and other situations as well. But we see it for a wide variety of different types of judgments. People overestimate how similar other people are to them themselves. So just because you like a particular product doesn't mean lots of other people like it too. Like for me, as you know, I like extremely sweet desserts, and I overestimate how many other people like extremely sweet desserts. Of course, knowing about this bias helps because I know my wife hates super sweet desserts, and I know a lot of people that won't eat double doozies. One of my favorite products. This is a chocolate chip cookie sandwich filled with uh, wedding cake icing, and it's about 1,000 calories, and it's not good for you. But
But what a way to go, right?
that's right. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, so one problem is people overestimate the extent to which their preferences generalize to other people, and that makes it
Yeah, and
tough,
and I
right?
think
If you, yeah, because managers do it too. Managers think, "Oh, I like this product, so I think most consumers will like it also."
yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make here is I've been guilty of it myself,
Mhm.
and I see marketers, uh, senior marketers included.
Yeah,
They make a judgment about it because of their own personal preferences. They like the
right.
color green, so it's gonna be green that goes into that ad, and
Yes.
I think those kinds of errors are unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
They're avoidable. What are the big chunks if you look at consumer behavior, kind of break it down into areas of study or subgroups? What are the things that people should zero in on with regards to consumer behavior?
Okay. Well, my area personally is consumer information processing. And this is all about getting inside of the head of the consumer. So, what kind of reactions do they have when they see a new ad? Or what kind of reactions do they have when they're shopping at a grocery store, looking at the shelves and discover something they haven't seen before? Um, but I already mentioned a few, right? Persuasion is huge, right? We're always trying to persuade consumers to buy our product rather than competitors' offerings. And I know you do a lot of work in social influence, the
Yeah.
Cialdini approach, right? So, one big principle of social influence is if everyone else wants a product, you want it too. There's a recent study out of UCLA that I like a whole lot, showing that people are heavily influenced by the number of clicks on a website or the number of clicks on a product review at Amazon. And the funny thing is, if if the product or review has received a lot of attention, like thousands or tens of thousands, people assume it's a good product. But the problem is they're not reading the reviews carefully. So this happens even if most of the reviews are negative, right? So that's a principle of social influence. We're influenced by um, by sheer numbers. So if a lot of people are commenting and reflecting on a particular product or service, we assume it's a good product. Without, even if we don't read the reviews very carefully. Huge problem, right? Should read the reviews. The content matters more than the number of
Than the
people that
numbers.
are clicking, but number of clicks actually has a bigger influence.
So, Frank, talk about the area of personality a little
Mhm.
bit.
Okay.
Uh, what, one of the things I think is so important is the aspects of the self image and
Yeah.
things that go on in that consumer's head regarding personality. What does that mean? Can you give us a
Yeah.
overview?
Yeah. A lot of companies try to segment the market based on individual differences. We all, at some level, know that people have different tastes and preferences, right? So a lot of your friends don't like the same things you do. Maybe they like different types of movies, different types of food, different types of beverages. Um, but So it kind of makes sense to divide up the market based on personality. I guess there's literally thousands of personality variables out there. I have a few of my favorites. Um, One of my favorites, as you know, is the need for cognitive closure. So personality can be measured fairly easily on these well-validated scales. You just fill out a questionnaire, and we can categorize you on some dimension. And one of my favorite dimensions is the need for cognitive closure. What we find with this variable, as this need or preference increases, people try to reach a judgment or decision as quickly as possible. And then once they reach a judgment or decision, they freeze on it. They don't change their mind, even when new information suggests that maybe perhaps they should. Right. So as need for closure increases, we tend to be more overconfident. We tend to reach judgments and decisions too quickly. We tend to overlook important information that's maybe hard to think about. It's difficult to uh, understand. Maybe it's technical jargon, something like that. And if you're not an expert, you might not understand the jargon. Uh, but so you sweep it under the rug if you're high in need for closure. If you're low in need for closure, though, you try to be more even-handed. You try to use all the relevant information. You don't rush to conclusions. You don't jump to conclusions. You take your time forming judgments and decisions. I'm fairly low in the need for cognitive closure. I have one research study that took me over 10 years to publish, and if you're high in need for closure, you don't have the patience to wait 10 years to get a job done. Right. Of
So,
course,
Frank,
that's the problem with the real world. Managers
right.
have crushing deadlines, and that increases their need for closure, even if they're already high in the need for closure. Now they're even higher because you got to meet this deadline. And the easiest way to meet a deadline is to jump to conclusions, sweep difficulties, inconsistencies under the rug, you know, and then freeze. Once you make a decision, you don't revisit it.
I want you to think about a marketer, the everyday marketer, like at Procter and Gamble or at a
Mhm.
other company,
Yeah.
and let's say they have two consumers, A and B. One is high need for closure. One is low need for closure.
Yeah.
How does the marketing approach differ for those two types of consumers?
Yeah, they're likely to be influenced by completely different types of ads. The high need for closure people want it simple. Just give me the one key benefit that this product offers, um, and make it fast. I need to know now what the key benefit is. But if you're low in need for closure, you're willing to read through lots of fine print. You'll want lots of specs, lots of details about product performance, right? So very different types of ads are needed for the two types of people. I think a lot of companies do this though. So a lot of companies will kind of use a shotgun approach with ads targeted for some people but not others, and then other ads targeted for a different group. It's kind of a shotgun approach, and you realize that you're not going to influence everyone with one type of persuasive message or one type of ad. So you use many different types, hoping to reach different segments, different types of people. There's lots
Yeah.
of other personality variables that are important too, like self-monitoring. And in psychology, we talk a lot
Yeah.
about the big five personality scale. Um, extroversion, introversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, and open-mindedness. Very interesting. And open-mindedness, as you can guess, is correlated somewhat with need for cognitive closure. So very, very interesting stuff.
Very interesting. And we have a comment here
Sure.
about segmentation, the importance of segmentation.
Very
But there are
important.
limitations to segmentation as well.
Yeah.
Where can marketers get themselves in trouble with segmentation if they really don't understand consumer behavior?
It's possible to segment too much. In my
Mm-hmm.
textbook, I give the example of Quaker State oil. At one time, they had 1,500 different oils on their product line. So they had all different kinds of weights for all kinds of different climates, for all kinds of different engines, big, small, medium. 1,500 though was too much, right? So think about the production and marketing costs of making 1,500 different types of motor oil. Some I don't know if they hired a consultant, but at one point they cut the line in half. Now you only have 750 motor oils, and profits went way up. Of course, you could argue 750 is probably too much too, right? There's a cannibalization problem, So,
Sure.
oh, the oil I really wanted isn't available. Oh, but this one looks close enough. I'll go with this one. I think we see it with cars too. GM has a really extensive product line, probably too extensive. But I had dinner with a GM executive once, and he was saying, "Yeah, we'd like to cut the line down, but politically we can't do it. How do you do it, right?"
Yeah, and I just read whether GM is coming out with an electric Corvette now.
I saw that just today. I saw that ad just today. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah,
Very
so now
interesting,
we
very
have an even
exciting.
longer product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep adding it.
Yeah.
So, Frank, I'm going to delve into, I know one of your favorite topics is the persnickety problem of omission neglect.
Right.
It was inevitable. You and I talk about it a lot,
Yeah.
and you've published a lot about this. Most people don't know about omission neglect. What the heck is that?
That's a term I made up basically for insensitivity to missing information, and
Okay.
and I mean information in the broadest sense. It's not just facts and figures. It could be any piece of information that's relevant to forming a judgment about a product or service. I should mention, I'll put in a plug for a book. There's a new book that just came out just this year. It's the American Psychological Association Handbook of Consumer Psychology. And my students and I have a chapter on omission neglect in there. So great book. We have one of the chapters. There's 33 chapters, I believe. So there's lots of different topics covered in this book. But all by tremendous people. Really, really a great group.
Congratulations. That's
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it
that's
took
fantastic.
a couple of years to write this. It took a little while to get
Yeah.
this done, but we're very happy with the finished product. But what we find though is that I'll give you a concrete example. In one of our recent studies, we gave people information about a credit card and asked them if they'd be interested in. Well, ask them to evaluate the card and to indicate whether they'd be interested in using this particular credit card. And in some conditions, we gave people full information. So everything you'd need to know to evaluate a credit card accurately was provided in the description of the card. We use product descriptions all the time in our research. In other conditions, though, we always use the experimental method, randomly assigning people to conditions. I'm not going to bore people with too many details. But in some conditions, we purposely left out critically important information. For example, we did a pretest showing that one of the most important things people want to know when they select a credit card is the interest rate. And pretty important, right? You need to know the interest rate. But what we found is when we gave people a brief description of the card, not mentioning the interest rate, no one seemed to notice. Everyone seemed to form extremely favorable evaluations of the card. They all wanted to use the card, and no one even noticed that we never mentioned interest rate, even though everyone knows that's probably the most important thing you need to know. Well, there's other things too, right? And the other information was fairly favorable. So it sounded like it was a pretty good card, but we didn't give them the interest rate. And the problem here is this can lead to decisions that you later regret.
Sure.
Because what if the interest rate is 25%? Well, you don't find that out until after you get the card and use it. And then when you're hit with the bill with a 25% interest rate, you realize you made a big mistake. So that's a problem. Overlooking important information can lead to big mistakes that we later regret. And we see it everywhere. We see it for all kinds of products and services. We keep pushing the envelope where we keep using more and more important information and leaving it out intentionally just to see if people notice. And what we find is in most conditions, they don't notice. There are moderators though, and there are things you can do to help the consumer notice. We've been
Like what?
One that we're using a lot right now with some success, not as much as you'd think, but some success. We call it the consider the unknown technique, where you just tell them, think about what's missing. Think about what additional information you would ideally like to have. And this helps a little, but not as much as you would think. It's hard to do. Even when you explicitly ask people to think about missing information, this is surprisingly difficult to do. It's hard to think about what's not there. We zero in on what is there too heavily, and this actually interferes with the ability to think about what's not there.
Are there things that marketers can do or should know about, or things that might affect how they promote their products, realizing consumers have omission neglect?
Well, I think a lot of companies do this. They purposely leave out bad attributes, attributes on which their product doesn't perform well, and they hope that people will overlook these attributes, and I think they frequently do. There are special cases, though. We find that experts, if you're an expert in a particular product category, you're less likely to neglect omissions, right? Overlook important omissions. But we also find that the level of expertise required to do this is extremely high. You have to be like in the 90th percentile or higher before you start to spontaneously detect important missing information.
So professions like crime scene investigators and accident investigators, they seem to be the ones that have this ability to see what's not there.
That's right.
And very, very well. If we as consumers and as marketers could use a little bit of that skill. Frank, what advice do you have for people to get up to speed more on consumer behavior? Where would they start?
Well, I have a textbook, and it's very readable. Undergraduates use it. I actually use it with my master's students as well, but I have them do cases, so they do some extra work as well. So there's quite a few textbooks on consumer behavior. There's one by me and my colleagues, Kardes, Cronley, and Klein.
Right.
We're actually thinking of revising it now and adding much more social media. We're thinking of changing the title to Consumer Behavior in the Digital World. So new title, new content. That's a summer project. So that's what we're working on right now. So Sue Mantell, who
Yes.
is an expert on social media, and we're bringing her in as a co-author. And she teaches social media every year, and as a good writer, she'll be perfect for this assignment.
That's great. I should invite Sue on a live stream here to talk a little bit about that work.
Okay.
Such a broad area and important area.
That's true.
Well, great. Well, Frank, thanks so much for giving us a peek inside the minds of the consumer. I think the bottom line is here that consumers make mistakes, and we have to be careful not to use our own judgments and project those onto consumers, thinking that we've got all the answers.
That's right.
We don't. Yeah. A little healthy understanding of consumer behavior can go a long way.
Right.
Good.
Yeah. There's no substitute for research. We think we understand consumers better than we do, but when you actually do some surveys and some experiments, there's usually some surprises. Right.
Good. All right, Frankie, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
I'm going to sign you off here.
Okay.
And we are going to conclude here, I wanted to wrap up by first thanking Frank for joining us and make this point that you also have a lot of resources here on LinkedIn Learning to understand different aspects of consumer behavior, as well as out in the academic domain, like Frank mentioned. It's worth an investment of your time to learn a little bit about this. Next week, next Tuesday at 11 a.m., I will be remote. I'll be in Portland, Maine, but I'm going to live stream about this topic. So, you want to be a professor? Have you ever thought about teaching at higher education or even in lower levels, high school? If you thought about teaching ever in your career, I'm going to give you some great advice about what you can do now to prepare yourself for a career in teaching later on. Please join me. Love to have you. And that's it. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, everybody. Bye bye.